FDR saved America, then the GOP ripped us apart. And, you know, as I note, today is the official beginning of the political season. It's, you know, it's the first Tuesday after Labor Day, or the first day after Labor Day. And it's kind of a Monday, Tuesday. And, you know, when I was at the DNC at the convention where I was broadcasting from the SiriusXM booth, it was amazing. I mean, you know, everybody was laying out how Republican red state governments were failing and how, you know, some of the very good for America, the middle class programs that Joe Biden first signed into law almost 4 years ago are doing well. He stopped inflation. We have the highest stock market in history. We have some of the best job numbers and unemployment numbers that we've seen since the 1960s. We have the fastest return of factories to America in over 50 years. And all of this raises a critical question. How did we go so far astray after FDR saved us from the Republican Great Depression? And what can we learn that can help from FDR that can help Democrats win elections and put America back together again? You know, first off, for an answer, we need to go back 50 years and see what happened. Back in 1971, Lewis Powell wrote his famous Powell memo. The next year, President Nixon put him on the Supreme Court. And he was the guy who wrote the Buckley versus Bellotti, the First National Bank of Boston versus Frank Bellotti decision in 1978 that said that corporations are persons, and as such, they have First Amendment rights of free speech, and as such, they can give unlimited amounts of money to political campaigns and things like that. I mean, that was the beginning of the whole thing kind of coming unraveled. That was how all that oil money flowed into the Reagan campaign 2 years later in 1980 to elect Ronald Reagan after he had negotiated with the Iranians illegally, you know, criminally violating the Logan Act and arguably committing treason, telling the Iranians to hold on to the hostages to hurt Jimmy Carter. So anyway, that was the 70s. And, you know, prior to that, we'd had an economy that had been humming along for 40 years. We had a top income tax bracket of 91%. We had a top corporate income tax bracket of 50%. That top personal income tax bracket encouraged CEOs to leave money in their companies and pay their employees better. That top 50% corporate tax bracket encouraged companies not to do corporate buybacks. Reagan legalized that in '82, but rather to invest in their own businesses, to develop new products, to do research and development. And that's why, you know, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and early 80s saw the fastest growth of American industry in history. Franklin Roosevelt and frankly, Republican Dwight Eisenhower, I mean, this was all before the GOP went insane, had rebuilt America after the Republican Great Depression. They gave us modern state-of-the-art public labs, schools, public hospitals all across the nation, nearly free college, trade school, and research support, healthy small and family businesses, unions protecting over a third of us, which created a wage floor that meant that 2/3 of us had the equivalent of a good wage, you know, union wage and benefits. We had an interstate highway system, a rail system, a network of new airports, all, you know, brand new and transforming America's commerce. When we handed America over to Ronald Reagan in 1981, it was a brand gleaming new country with a prosperous and thriving middle class. And then, of course, Reagan did what Reagan did. He had all these new ideas, right? We're the Republicans. We're the, you know, now that we're rid of that Dwight Eisenhower guy, we're the party of ideas. Ideas that we got from, you know, David Koch when he ran for president or vice president in 1980. Like, you know, let's do away with the Department of Education. Let's stop funding education so that, you know, now instead of paying, you know, the federal and state governments paying 80% of the college tuition, as they did in 1980 when Reagan came into office. You could go to college anywhere in the country and pay for it by working at McDonald's. I did. I mean, I didn't work at McDonald's. I worked at Bob's Big Boy on Trowbridge Road in East Lansing, Michigan. It's the same thing. But now tuition is 80% of, and federal and state is only 20%. I mean, we've literally flipped it upside down. Reagan did that. He said if we just cut the tax rate on the morbidly rich from the 74% it was when he came into office down to 27%, he actually took it to 25% for 1 year. He said that the benefits would trickle down to everybody else. Right. Now billionaires pay only 8% of income tax. I guarantee you pay more than a billionaire does, even if you're living on Social Security. And as a result of this, we now have the greatest wealth and income inequality in the world. In fact, the greatest the world has ever seen. We have 3 families who are worth more than the bottom half of America. Half. $50 trillion was taken out of the homes, retirement plans, income, pensions of working class people. $50 trillion and transferred directly into the money bins of the top 1%, with Reagan's 2 or 3 tax cuts and Bush's 2 or 3 tax cuts and Donald Trump's 1 massive tax cut. $50 trillion that you and I gave to about 11,000 families in America who earn more than, who are worth more than $100 million. It's incredible. Republicans told us if we just deregulated guns, remember those bumper stickers, an armed society is a polite society? You see them in cars back in the 1980s. This was Reagan's thing, right? Just deregulate guns. Well, the Supreme Court, 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court got into that act and did that. And now, instead of a polite society, we have the highest rate of homicide in the world, gun homicide in the developed world. We have the highest rate of children being killed by bullets of anywhere in the world. More children are killed by guns than by anything else. It's surpassed car accidents now. And school shootings are pretty much a daily thing, certainly a weekly thing. Republicans told us if we just ended sex education and outlawed abortion, we'd go back to the 1950s, father knows best, where every child is wanted and every marriage is happy, right? Instead, now that abortion is illegal in 20 red states, we have a return to deadly back alley abortions. Republicans told us if we just killed off civics and history classes in school, we'd liberate our young people to study math and science, right? Now, 2 generations of Americans can't even name the 3 branches of government, much less explain the meaning of the Constitution's general welfare phrase. Republicans told us if we just stopped enforcing the anti-monopoly and antitrust laws that had protected small businesses for nearly 100 years, that big businesses would get bigger and more efficient. Well, they sure did that, and they wiped out the ability of small businesses to start. We no longer, I mean, you visit any mall in America, do you see locally owned companies? I don't. They said if we just changed the law to let corporations pay their senior executives with stock, that they'd be incentivized. Well, instead they're incentivized to take billions, hundreds of billions of dollars a year out of corporations and put it in their own pockets instead of companies developing new things. They told us if we just turned our healthcare decisions over to insurance companies instead of doctors, the system would get more efficient, right? Yeah. They told us if we just let a handful of individual companies and billionaires buy most of our media, that 1,000 media flowers would grow. How did that work out? They told us if we just got rid of our unions, then the corporate bosses would look kindly on us and give us better pay. Yeah, right. That was a lie, too. They told us if we just went with a trade agreement that Bush and Reagan had negotiated, NAFTA, that we see an explosion of jobs. Oh, we saw an explosion, all right. 60,000 factories gutted. They told us global warming was a hoax. It's a hoax. Yeah, the hoax, turns out, was the lie that there's no such thing as global warming. And then there's the biggest GOP lie of all. Money is the same thing as free speech. The bottom line here is that we have now had for 43 years the full Republican experience. And we don't want to hear Republicans sermonizing about deficits that they caused or welfare programs that they damaged or even whatever they call faith these days, be it the death penalty, forcing raped children to give birth at the barrel of a gun, or burning books. We're over it, Republicans. A new America is being birthed right now, right in front of us, and you and your morbidly rich patrons can't stop it anymore. I'll be right back.